Today's guest is Maude Michaud. She is an acclaimed
Hi.
filmmaker from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. She is currently working on a feature film through the Telefilm Talent to Watch program. This is her second feature film. She has made 20 short films, 18 of which were self-financed and self-produced. We'll get into all that, but let's start with what people want to know. Telefilm Talent to Watch. You finally got it. Congratulations. Tell us about
Thank
Requiem
you.
for a Sad Girl.
So, Requiem for a Sad Girl is a psychological thriller that is heavily inspired by giallo films, which I really love, and other genre film. And it's a surreal story that follows a young woman who has to venture into her own psyche to fix what's broken when her trauma unexpectedly takes on a human form and starts stalking her in her daily life. That was a mouthful.
I see your pitch is perfect. Probably one of the reasons why you got that
Try.
$250,000. For people who don't know, what is Telefilm Talent to Watch?
So, Telefilm Talent to Watch is a grant that is given to emerging creators for the making of their first feature film. It is a straightforward grant for those who know the Canadian system and how it works. Usually, Telefilm and other funding bodies, they would come on board for a project only for a certain percentage of your budget. This program is slightly different because it's meant to give people a chance to make connection and build their career and essentially pave their entryway into the industry. The grant can be the full budget for the film. We do not have any requirements to get other fundings, but we can also get extra funding if ever we're lucky enough to find it. We do have a cap. In a nutshell, that's what the program is.
Did you get 250K and you can have a budget up to 500K? Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And can I ask what is
Yeah.
the total budget of your current version of the film?
It's 255. Okay. So we did try some extra ones. And we're still keeping the door open for post-production, like, once it's filming. But I mean, at this stage, we did try to apply for some extra funding, which unfortunately we did not get. We did try to find a distributor to help trigger tax credits, which unfortunately at this point we do not yet have. So at this point, I'm like, let's just like cap it. Let's do it with 255. And then that doesn't mean that we can't still try to find extra funding so that we can elevate the post-production. But for now, we have a full like production budget, which is great. And we can still do the post. It's just everybody's, essentially giving us very big favor and taking very big cut in their rates to work on the film. We are actively trying to find some extra money so we can give people a little bit more and pay them what they're worth.
I appreciate your transparency. We're waiting to hear back on Talent to Watch. And essentially, I believe what I appreciate about you as well is we're like, look, the train is leaving the station. If you guys want to get on
Hmm.
board, we can put more coal in the fire, right? I think one of the issues with the Canadian industry is there's a lot of filmmakers waiting for funding because it represents a form of permission. And so they just don't make anything. And to be fair, I think it's also informed by these government institutions that are like, you need a complete budget and you need
Hmm.
a minimum guarantee and you need this. And the reality is like, if you really wait for what the government's asking for to mitigate all their risk, you'll never make anything. So, as a writer director who's self produced 20 short films or so, 18,
Yep.
and your first feature, is there anything that you would share to inspire filmmakers who are waiting for permission or funding?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I should start by saying, like, it's great that I got talent to watch, but at the end of the day, it's like winning the lottery, right? Because I mean, this is how the system works. So I was lucky enough for that project to win the lottery, but that does not guarantee anything for any future project. Because at the end of the day, every round of application is different. You're always competing with different people. The reality is that these institutions, they have a specific budget to allocate. And then at the end of the day, it's like, I've applied in the past and got declined, and I was told that I was essentially competing with an Oscar winner. There's all of these, factors that you can never know. You never know when you're going to apply. If, I don't know, David Cronenberg's also applying, like, at the same time as
Right.
you. So that's why it's just a matter of like the stars aligning. And that's something I understood for years. Like, I've been actively applying for the past 20 years to programs and initiatives with different projects. Got mostly no's, But then I kept applying anyways, because I mean, like, it's good to keep applying and keep yourself active in that way. But also that's how I ended up doing all these shorts self-finance, because I realized very early on that if I waited for permission, I would just like not do anything, So there's a friend of mine who said, like, she gave herself her own green light. I love that mentality, so if you're waiting for other people to give you a green light, sure, yeah, you might get like a bigger budget, get to do things on a grander scale, but in the meantime, what else can you do to stay active? Because all of these things, they all add up. When you finally do apply, if you have 20 shorts, I like to think that the 20 shorts that I've made and that indie feature probably weighted in the balance, when I applied to Talent to Watch, as in I might not have had any experience working with a big budget, but I've made these with no budget. So trust me with a 250,000 and I can show you what I can do with this. So that's always been
Yeah.
my philosophy.
And I can't wait. And I share the philosophy, and I'm so proud of you and appreciate what you've
Thank you.
accomplished.
Yeah. Oh, and also just one quick thing to add, if you'll let me,
Please.
because it's something I have thought a workshop in the past about making a horror movie on a very low budget, and one of the my biggest takeaway that I gave to people is like, if you have to remember one thing, make it this, is that use your limitation as an inspiration for your creativity, because it's a lot of it is about shifting how you think about things. It's easy to be like, I want to tell this story, I need X amount of money. What I started doing is that I reversed engineers, like, with this amount of money, what story can I tell with what I have access to? Like, is it a cool location that I have access to? Okay, cool. Can I write something in that cool location that I can get for free that people would not like would have to pay for? Like, what can you bring to the table creatively? What's your asset and what can you build around it? So like, use those limitation, like budget limitation, as a challenge for your own creativity. That's kind of how I've approached my work.
I love that. Yeah. Thanks for adding that. Walk me through the logistics of applying for Talent to Watch. From which stream did you apply for? Was it the industry stream, the festival stream? Because there's so many. I know you don't work for Telefilm. You don't have to break down all four.
Yeah.
Please do if you can. But tell me about how you even got into contention.
So actually, it's interesting that you asked me that. So I applied to the Filmmaker Direct stream, which is fairly recent. I think it's in recent years. Again, I'm not an historian and I'm not a telefilm rep, so I cannot say when this started being possible. But I know for years I have been aware of Talent to Watch. It's just that for so many years, that like idea of like partnering up with an industry partner seemed very daunting, and I didn't have those connections, to make this happen. So I think I kept myself from applying, thinking it would be too complex to like first compete for those organizations to know who I am, then have them recommend my project. But I still like, kept on following the news. And then at some point I saw that they opened the Filmmaker Direct stream. And for those who don't know, the Filmmaker Direct, again, I might not know absolutely all of the, criterias, but it's for any filmmakers that fit in one of the underrepresented voice categories. So they finance work by women, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus folks. Also, there might be other also criterias, but I fit some of the criterias, and my production team also does. We gave it a shot, and then we applied through the Filmmaker Direct stream, and we got it. So I guess the logistics, well, first you need a script, obviously, and you need to have a good script. I've heard often in the past at other industry events from producers who've come on board and helped, produce project from Talent to One project, and everybody always said the most recurring comments I've heard is like, it's good, but their script needed another pass. Like, they got it, but like, that was the main thing. So I was like, okay, so I need to really get the script to a space that was like the best it could be. And then once I had the script, put together my team, it all also comes down to the pitch video. That's something I've heard informally from a lot of people, where the pitch video is an important element, whatever that means, because that's all that was told to me. So we took it as in, okay, so we have a very a specific visual style that we want to have for the film. So we shot our pitch video in that same visual style to bring people in that mood of what we're trying to do because of the surrealism of the script. That's why we tried to recreate it. We rented a studio and then we created those kind of surrealist tableaus where we actually, me and my co-producer addressed the camera and pitched our project, but within those environments, and making, like, explaining that these environments, this is what it would look like in the film, to show that we could do it in the context of a pitch video. So if you give us money, we'll definitely be able to do it on a bigger feature. And also an interesting comment that I got, again, informally, was that in my director's vision that I submitted, I did acknowledge that the project was ambitious compared to the budget level we were applying for. And I did explain, because I was aware. See, that's the thing. I think it all comes down to what I was saying, be aware of your own limitations. So I was aware that the project was artistically and visually ambitious. I just, like, instead of, like, just leaving it up in the air, like, I actually did address that and did, like, take some extra space to explain how I would address these things. Because a wise producer once told me, um, a lot of, like, any funding agencies, essentially they're looking for a reason to say no because they can only finance so much. So, like, the moment they have a reason to say no to a project, then they move on to the next. That's what I've always been told. Like, the gray zones, that could be a reason for them to say no.
This is a
Yeah.
pro and a con of the Canadian funding system because basically, yeah, that it's like make it easy for them to check the boxes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many projects, right, that they can finance. And very often, especially looking at anyone who wants to tackle something that's like a more Canadian story or a more local or regional stories, I've been told so many times that, let's say, a story that would be like, not so much a biopic, but inspired by specific events, like, that it so happened that one year there are two distinct producers with two distinct teams who applied with projects that are about the exact same topic,
Right.
so they can only pick one. So that's the thing, like, anything that is topical, as well, you run the risk of, like, competing, with someone else who has a very similar topic. And because they can only fund so many projects, then they'll go, which one do we like the best? Which team has the bigger track record or something like that? So that's what I said. Like, it's like playing the lottery, right? It's all a matter of, like, how many odds do you have stacked against your project? And it's not about you as a person, but it's more about the whole context around who else is applying at the same time. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, one that I have not fully grasped yet, but, like, I'm starting to see some patterns.
Yeah, you're talking about the old Armageddon Deep Impact scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this happens even on a smaller scale, like, project. I mean, because the collective subconscious is a thing. I mean, at some point I was, like, developing a movie that had a very specific style. I don't want to say too much about it because it's still in the work, but, like, something like in the road movie genre, right? And, like, there's just so much you can do in the road movie, especially if you veer into genre films. And then I've heard, like, oh yeah, there's these other guys who've also been developing a script that was very similar to mine. So then once I heard this, it became about, like, well, what sets mine apart? Like, how can I, and then take those elements and really push them, like, to just be like, well, it's not anymore. It's not a road movie anymore. It's a movie about this. But that happens to be a road movie. Whereas, like, their approach was very much, it's a road movie first, and then these things happen, so if that makes sense. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. There's so many questions, follow-up questions I have for you. I'll start with what might be most valuable to potential audiences, which is you mentioned really polishing the script. I'm assuming from the budget you mentioned, you didn't get funding to write the script, which in
No.
America would mean that you wrote it on spec. That would be the term
Yeah.
they'd use. Here in
Yeah.
Canada, I think there are a lot of writers who don't write scripts because they're writing grants to get the money to write a script, and that holds them back from doing the writing. So I appreciate that you kind of wrote on spec, and that allowed you to have like a product you could sell to the
Mm-hmm.
investors that are Telefilm that was like
Mm-hmm.
polished, and that allowed
Yeah.
them to buy your product, so to speak, or invest in this project. Can you speak to how you, as a writer, director, producer, balance, I'm just going to write this versus I'm going to apply for a grant to write it?
Well, I mean, some people might not like this because I do know the way the industry works. Yeah. And I do believe that everybody should be paid for their work. The reality of it is that I've been writing everything on spec for the past 25 years. Personally, I don't like waiting for permission. And I've met enough people in the industry where it's like it's one thing to pitch something. And I'm mostly saying this, it sucks, but like when you begin or where you're still making a name for yourself, a lot of people will be like, they hear great ideas every day, but for them to be interested, if you already have a script, like
Yeah.
I've met so many people, even people from other provinces, people from the US, they're like, well, once you have something written, even if it's just a first draft, like they kind of want to see what's your style, what's direction you're going to go in. Now, I know some people writing samples and then they try to sell it. I mean, I'm impatient. I mean, what am I going to do with the rest of my time anyways? I mean, I'm happy when I write. I'm happy when I create. So, I mean, I'm very happy to write on spec. I, of course, obviously as well, to do the whole application path of like trying to get money to write. But if I waited for this, I would never have made any of my films, you know, because I mean, I never got support to develop and to write. I hope that at some point it's going to change, you know, but for now, my process is very much like I have an idea, I work it out on paper, and very often just rewriting, like writing, rewriting. And that's how I feel like because sometimes my main idea, like the kernel that I begin with, is very like it's cool, it's interesting to me, but there's not that much that sets it apart. And it's by going through the process of writing it, that's when I find its soul and like really what sets it apart. And sometimes I've had instances where I wrote like 3 drafts of a thing before I realized, oh, it should be that instead. And then that's when, like, you know, it just kind of clicked and became something else. Even in a way, Requiem for a Sad Girl, I started writing it. It was just supposed to be something else, like an idea. I had the first 6 page, like the idea just for the first 6 pages that just kind of pop up one day. I was like, I need to write this. And then I wrote it. So I'm like, okay, where do we go with this? And then I tried to push in a direction and I'm like pulling teeth. And then as I kept on writing, I was like, that's when the real core of the story emerged and showed itself to me. And I'm like, oh, that's so much more interesting. So I still kept those 6 pages. That's a funny thing at the end of the day. That was like the starting point. But everything after those 6 pages like radically changed from like the first version that I wrote. Yeah.
I am a big fan of day jobs in Canada. I really want to
Yes.
demystify this. We worked at Mattel together, and
Yes.
then I worked at Shopify. And honestly, I don't think I would be where I am today as a filmmaker if it hadn't been for after 10 years of freelancing. I actually think this is what helped me break through. And so I assume you were
Yeah.
writing this script while you were at Mattel.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
fair?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, that was one of the many scripts because I never stopped writing and I always have like more than one projects on the go. But yeah, I've been having day jobs honestly since like 2012. Like, you know, that's when I entered job. And I never really stopped having day jobs and continuing to do this. Even when I made my first independent feature, I still had a full-time day job and then I took 3 weeks of vacation to shoot it, then went back to work the next day, you know, the day after wrap. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It feels like I've tried the freelance life in the past. And in all honesty, I found myself stressing so much about having to find clients and contracts and stuff like this that it ends up like just sucking up. Like you end up like working a 9 to 5 anyways, just keeping your freelance business afloat and then maybe not being paid as much as if you had a full-time day job, and then that causes some financial stress, and any sort of stress or worry is hindering creativity. At least it is in my case, you know. So for me it's been like over a decade of just like working day jobs, and a lot of the times, like, you know, not that I'm like, you know, miserable in my day jobs, but it's a job, you know, it's like it's not my passion in life. So a lot of the times I would like use that kind of frustration to like be like chained to a desk, not able to do my true passion. That the moment I get home, I start working and it's like, like, you know, the floodgates open, right? Because then that passion is there. So, and yeah, and meanwhile, the day job kind of covers all of the stress and worry of like, you know, everyday life. So I can do my, you know, just really follow my passion and just creatively write.
That's so great. My process is the opposite, where it's like I love going into a cafe for 6:30 a.m., 7 a.m.
Yeah,
and get a few pages down and then go into the
yeah,
day job at 9. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm already thrilled that I went to the gym of working out on the
yeah,
screenplay. And then I'm
yeah,
like, let's make some money and use other skill sets to generate revenue. That's the other thing
yeah,
that's great about process
yeah,
is being able to compartmentalize from the craft. And at the same
yeah,
time, we have to play the grant game because
yeah,
there's a certain element in the industry that's like getting
yeah,
grants is how those organizations interpret success in a way or your growth, and
yeah.
then awards are another one.
Yeah. And I mean, something interesting that I would just want to add about the day job is that I actually, if anything, right now, I'm in the space where I can really demystify the whole idea of
Yeah.
like a day job versus full-time artist. Cause I quit my day job when I got that grant, to just be able to focus on it. Cause I see this as like, this is a career I want to build. I want to really give it my everything. And I mean, since then I figured, oh, I'll have so much time to write everything that I want to write. The reality of it is that I'm still productive, like creatively productive, the same amount of hours as when I used to have the day job. The only difference is that instead of being between 7 and 10 at night, they're now during the day. So I get to have evenings and weekends. So, but at the end of the week, I end up working pretty much the same amount of time that I used to work on my project, because creative work, it does require a lot of like energy and creative juice.
Yeah. So tell me about your day to day now. You're prepping for the shoot. What does that look like to get to commit yourself and dedicate yourself full time to prep? That must be amazing. What's a day in the life of Mode right now?
Well, currently, I mean, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I don't have a full on routine because every single day is different, because there's always like, as with everything in prep, there's going to be things that pop up, like problems to solve and everything. Currently, what my day looks like, well, I mean, every morning kind of starts with email. I kind of keep the same type of mindset as I used to keep during my day job while working, like, just handle all the admin stuff first, in the morning. Then afterwards, right now, I'm very deep into doing my breakdown. So just going through the script again, scene by scene, breaking down the shots and finding a lot of visual references and images, like whether framing I like or lighting that I want to recreate or stuff like that, or like, arts inspiration. So just putting together a lot of document. That's what I'm currently like in the midst of. And also at the same time, as I'm going through, sometimes I read a scene, I'm like, I'm not sure about that line. I feel like I'm constantly rewriting the script. But at the same time, during the day, then I have lots of back and forth. For example, yesterday, my production design team, they emailed me mid-afternoon with a whole list of questions, like, for certain scenes, like, how do you see this? How do you see that? So lots of like back and forth, like, discussion with the different departments, lots of meetings as well, like, production meetings and, planning location visit. Just really, it feels like also I am co-producing the film, so I do a lot of producing work as well. So I mean, the line kind of blurs between producing and creativity. But yeah, these days it's mostly just really working a lot on like, just trying to find this visual language and articulate it on paper in a way that makes sense for someone else to be able to see what I see in my head. And at night, I have a stack of DVDs that I want to rewatch that are similar movies, like whether I like the mood, the visual style, or anything. So my entertainment is like I finish my day by watching one of those movies, cell phone in hand, so I can like take
Yeah.
pictures, or something like that, or like film sequence and stuff like that. So yeah.
Cool. Tell me about working with Jen Viens.
Jen Viens amazing. Yeah. They're a really, really great producer. It's funny because I mean for so long I've worked alone and it was a learning curve, to learn how to work with someone else. And they really kind of stepped in very nicely. And it feels like we kind of complement each other in terms of like the stuff that I like to do. They're like, not that like, I mean, they let me do it. And then the stuff that I don't like to do is something that they really enjoy. So, I mean, it's been a great, like, a really great dynamic working, yeah, working with Jen back and forth.
Okay, so we talked about writing, we talked about grants, we're talking about production. What have you learned from the time between making your first film, Dis, and this one?
I've learned to reframe a lot my expectation in life and like how this whole industry works. I guess I might have been guilty of the magical thinking of like, oh, I'm making my first feature. Therefore, everything will just magically happen and fall on my plate after. All the doors will open. And no, it took me more than 10 years. Like, I honestly, it's not because I didn't know. I've been like, literally, I was pitching new project the week that before the premiere of this. You know, I was at Fantasia's Market. I was like, my film is premiering. Here's my new film. Like, you know, I'm looking for producers, looking for a team. And I did get some meeting. I mean, yeah, sure, great. Having a first feature does open the door, make people take you a bit more seriously than they would when I had just a series of shorts. But the reality of it is that it's a hard business, you know, and while I did have a first feature, the fact that the budget was so low obviously was not perfect. It showed, you know, I mean, I didn't have professional union actors. Some parts of it were rough around the edges because, you know, we did the best we could with what we had access to equipment wise. The editing, I mean, I didn't have any money for an editor. I edited it. Now in retrospect, like I was really happy with it when it came out. Now in retrospect, I've seen it enough that it's like, oh yeah, I could have used a whole other passive editing, you know, and things like this. You know, I like to think that while it was imperfect, like it did still kind of get people to take me seriously, but it did like get me to realign, I guess, my expectation. Again, through the years, like I met so many wise people who gave me advice. One of them was that I was trying to jump way too high in terms of my expectation. I went from like a $20,000 feature to like really wanting to make $1 million feature. And he was like, well, you should more like aim for like 250,000, then 500,000, then the million. And I didn't like hearing this, you know, I was stubborn. I'm like, no, but my idea I have, and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it took 10 years, and look at me, I'm doing 250,000. So I'm like, I'm not going to say that person's name, but you were right. So yeah, I wish I listened to you 6 years ago when you told me this. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, the fact that it took so long really pushed me to also question myself as a filmmaker and what it is that I really wanted to say. What were really the stories that I was interested in, and who was I? Like what was even my identity as a filmmaker? And that's when it feels like when I finally connected it and I found it, that's when things started happening. Things started aligning. I met the right people. I got the interest. And I'm grateful for this because I'm also like looking back at like the project that I was pitching at the same time as this. I'm like, ooh, it wasn't that good. You know, I'm like, okay, so 2012 Maude was not that mature in like her like directing approach and what she wanted to say. Now I do have something to say. So it just gave me that self-discovery moment, you know, for lack of a better term.
Amazing.
Yeah.
One last thing that I really do want to touch on is that you own your own production company. This is
Yes.
something I feel very passionately about, especially as
Mm-hmm.
a Quebecer who's
Mm-hmm.
working in multiple languages. And
Mm-hmm.
I have found that owning my own production company has been essential to growing as both an artist and entrepreneur because it allows me to tap into both arts grants from arts councils, provincially and federally, as well as private film funds and investments, both
Mm-hmm.
nationally and internationally. You don't have to agree or disagree with me, but my question is, how do you feel about also owning your production company? Would you advise, how would you advise that artists think through the thought exercise of whether they should or should not incorporate?
Well, I think I'm all in favor of it. Like, you know, I share a similar thought as yours, but also the subtle difference that I want to make between maybe like our case and like other artists is that I personally, because of what I said, like where I was like, I don't want to wait for permission, I want to create my own opportunity, means I'm also stepping into producing all of my work, you know? Sure, one day I'd love to like, you know, have a producer say, oh, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Here, let me produce all your stuff for you. You have nothing to do. And even then, I think I would be like annoyed where it's like, no, but I want to do like, cause I'm so used to wearing like a million hats during the production. Like, you know, it feels like it's how I've always worked. That being said, like for now, I do enjoy producing. Like I do enjoy having that control over my own work because I feel like it empowers me. And for that to happen, you need to have an incorporated company, if only just to apply to programs like Sodec or even Telefilm. I mean, Talent to Watch, it's okay because even if you're not incorporated, they make an exception where like they give you a certain like amount of time once you get notified to incorporate, then they give you the money, you know? I mean, in my case, it was already incorporated, so it's all like, okay, good, let's go, you know? So they will give you that leeway if you don't, because it's an emerging creator program. But if you apply to the regular program, you need to be incorporated. Same with like, you know, applying to so many things, you need to be incorporated. But also anyone doing film, it's always a good idea to be incorporated. Sure, it's a bit more paperwork and stuff like that, but at least it protects you also. Like, it's wise fiscally, especially if you have a day job. I mean, in my case, it was very beneficial because, you know, for even for tax purposes, because, you know, I had a full-time salary for a lot of time, and then I had whatever I was making for my film. So it allowed for like any kind of revenue that I got from my film to stay in the company so I could be reinvested in more film, you know, which is how it should be, as opposed to just being like, hey, I just like made that extra amount of money off of my work and then that all that money like, you know, disappears. Like, you know, so it's like really like it's good to kind of dissociate your work from who you are, like, you know, to kind of create that distance. Also legally it protects you, and it is just like I think overall it makes you like it helps to be taken more seriously.
Mhm.
But that being said, if someone only wants to write or only wants to direct and they already have connection, then maybe a company might be overkill for them. So I guess it depends on like how much of the producing you want to take on and like also what else you do. There's so many factors, but I do think overall it is a good thing to have that distinction and to be able to treat it as a different entity.
Anything else that you want to talk about or share?
I don't know. Feels like I could talk for like hours about all of this.
Yeah, I know.
I
We
think
could
we'll
go
have
for
to do
hours.
a part two. Yeah.
That'd be great. What's your favorite movie?
It's hard. It changes all the time. I can say some of my favorite. I really like this French movie called The Girl on the Bridge, La Fille sur le Pont. It's from the early 2000s with Vanessa Paradis. I love Fight Club, even though and I think it's been very widely misinterpreted what the message of this film is. Fight Club is in there in my top 10. I really like Buñuel's Belle de Jour. I love The Shining. So yeah, I have favorites across genre, but I'd say those are like, you know, so it's like, how many did I say? I said four, so I'll add the substance. There you go. You have the top five right there.
Great pick. Mo, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today. Thanks
you.
for this chat.
Thanks for
This
having
was a
me.
pleasure. And
Thank you so much.
anyone listening or watching, let us know in the comments what you want to hear about in part two.